Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Peninsula from Karma Games. Peninsula is a flip and write exploration game from Karma Games, probably most famous for Clans of Caledonia, although they do have a bunch of other games in the works. Speaking of those other games in the works, that's where you can currently get Peninsula. You see, they had a bunch of crowdfunding games over the past year, and right now in the Pledge Manager, which does close shortly, that's where you can currently get your hands on this flip and write game. This, by the way, is a prototype, all rules and components of the exchange, and I'll have a link to those crowdfunding campaigns, or somewhere, I'll have a link somewhere down below where you can go ahead and get your hands on this before those Pledge Managers close shortly. Or if you're watching this in the future, well, I'm sure you can get your hands on this one way or the other. Anyways, that's enough about the kind of background of this. Let's talk about the game. As I said already, this is a 1 to 4 player explore and write, a 1 to 4 player flip and write exploration game. The general idea is you are trying to fulfill a bunch of scoring conditions on your maps. There are variable maps right now. This is a full pad over here. There are various maps you can go ahead and utilize as far as different shapes you have, but you give each player one of these boards, and then from there, the players are trying to go ahead and explore the island. The way they're going to do that is they're going to have the exploration token over here, which is going to go somewhere on the island on a starting zone of their choice. You'll also have 5 cards removed from the game so players can see certain combinations of symbols that will not be in play. This will help them plan around what they can and can't reasonably achieve. Since the symbols in the game are evenly split amongst the cards, with perfect synergy amongst the even distribution of them, although that distribution is going to be ruined by the 5 cards removed from the game. Certain symbols will be less available based on these visible cards out of play. Outside of that, you also have goals. You're going to have 6 different goals that players will then mark on their personal board to see what goals there are, as well as various extra abilities you can earn if you move to certain spots around the board. You can earn these extra abilities, as well as the points for unlocking those abilities. Once all of that is marked, because you have to draw these little symbols into these little zones over here, once you've marked all those things and you're ready to start, you're going to go ahead and start flipping cards. The turn structure for this is a player is going to take one of these cards and flip it, and then the active player chooses a side that they want, and the other players get the opposing side. So for example, right now, if I were to take this card and choose the mountain, the other players would get those cliffs over there. So for example, I'll just show you how this plays out. I'm going to look at my explorer over here, and I'm going to draw a mountain somewhere around him on the board. Now you can move before or after that, but right now I'll avoid that. We'll talk about movement shortly. So for example, if I want to go ahead and draw this, I'll go ahead and draw this down here. I'm not thinking too strategically about this. I'm more focused on teaching you how to play. So right now, I draw that mountain symbol. The other players can take those cliffs and draw them on their own board. Every single card, you have the opportunity to go ahead and take that card. And I should actually note, you really have your choice from 2 face-up cards, and the active player will choose one of those cards, and then they'll be able to draw that symbol. So if I've chosen this card, I'll draw the symbol. The other players get the opposing side over there. Now you can spend these symbols over here to choose the side the active player chose. You'll have a variable number depending on the player count, and if you mark off one of these, you can say, forget it, I want that mountain, I'm going to take it, but you have to mark off one of those in order to do so, and these are also worth a point at the end of the game for each of those you haven't used. That's the general structure. You're going to take a card, you're going to draw the symbol, other players get the other symbol, you're going to draw that symbol around, not underneath, but around your explorer over here, and then you can take any moves before or after. We'll talk a bit more about movement shortly. Before we talk about movement, let's talk about what you're trying to do in this game, how you score points. Over here on the sheet are the 9 things you're going to score points for, in addition to the scoring objectives, which are these cards over here. I should note, by the way, this is the individual player setup. Everything else is the general common pool to all players. So right now, as far as how these work over here, we'll talk about the goals last, but over here, every filled-in symbol of 4 different types of the houses, the boats, the tunnels, as well as the trees, when you fill them in, you get 2 points per symbol. Meaning when you draw a symbol on your map, that's not filling it in. You have to fill the objectives of that symbol in order to fulfill it in. Houses get filled in once they have 4 different symbols surrounding it, and yes, that can include houses. Ships get filled in when there's an arrow pointing to the ship. There's a few ways you can do that. We haven't talked about arrows yet, but for example, these harbor spaces over here point to that. So if I draw a ship over here, there's already an arrow pointing to it, and I can fill it in right away. Tunnels get filled in at the end of the game, assuming they are not next to another tunnel. Basically, a tunnel next to a tunnel, neither gets filled in. Tunnels that have the tunnels adjacent to them, those will get filled in. Trees get filled in if they are adjacent to other trees. And those are the 4 basic symbols you can fill in. That's going to be 2 points for each of those that you do. These over here, these cliffs that you score, cliffs are drawn towards the edge of the water. So if you draw a cliff, if you choose a space, so for example, if I chose this space to draw cliffs, I would draw here, here, and here. It touches the water's edge, and that's 3 cliff side. At the end of the game, you're going to total your cliff sides. Again, that's 3. You divide it by 2, and every 2 of them is worth 1 point. Mountains score a point for every symbol next to it that is filled in. So you're looking at those houses, boats, tunnels, and trees, and if they're next to mountains, each mountain scores 1 point for each adjacent symbol. You get 1 point for every one of these life preservers over here you have not spent. You get 2 points for every one of these special abilities you have unlocked, and you do that by getting your explorer to that zone, at which point you unlock the ability and get 2 points. And then over here, lastly, you get 1 point for every empty space that you have not in any way filled in on your board. The last way you get points are going to be the goals. These goals over here want specific configurations. So for example, this symbol over here, which is 3 of a specific type. It could be 3 trees, which would be better because 3 tunnels would be bad over here, but it could be 3 trees, 3 mountains, 3 houses. If you get this symbol, and it could be mirrored or flipped or reversed or all of that, but if you get one of these over here, then I can go ahead and mark off. Let's pretend for a second, I'm just going to show you over here. Let's pretend we drew 3 trees over here. So we drew 3 trees, we have those 3 trees, we fill them in because they're all adjacent to each other. Again, ignoring the fact that I actually have to move my person around in order to draw those. But then once we've done that, we can look over here and we can say, look, G over here has been fulfilled by trees, so I'm going to get those 5 points, but additionally, I can no longer use trees for any of the other types. There are 6 different types here, and that's going to match these 6 different symbols, and so you have to diversify how you build out those points. That is how you score points in the game. That's what you're trying to do. But from there, the way you're going to do that is you have to manage your movement around the board because you can only draw symbols next to your explorer. Plus, you're trying to get those points from those various extra abilities as well as unlocking the abilities themselves. So you have to try to manage around how you're going to move around the board. That's where the movement comes in. You start the game with 2 regular movements and a harbor movement. Harbor movement lets you move from a harbor space to another harbor space by crossing this off. Regular movement lets you move to an adjacent space, that's plain and simple. And as you draw trees, you'll unlock balloon movements, and once you unlock it, you circle it. Once you spend it, you draw it out. And those balloon symbols that you move to around the board however you want, including crossing bodies of water over there. Outside of that, you're going to be utilizing movements from certain areas. So for example, if you draw a house in the game, let's go ahead and find a house over here. In fact, let's just swap this around so I can show you. If we were to take this symbol over here and draw a house, when you draw a house, you can go ahead and draw a movement symbol next to it. And you can draw that movement to any other spot. For example, I'm going to draw it on my own spot over here, underneath me, and draw that double-sided movement. And that means at any point, without having to utilize any ability, I can simply move back and forth from these 2 spots. So for example, if I was over here, I can just by default move over here. I can also cross off a boot to move over here, and you can utilize the combination of default movement symbols, which is a house is a double-sided movement, a boat is going to give you a single-sided movement, and tunnels simply let you hop from tunnel to tunnel. If you have a tunnel on the board, you have a tunnel over here, you can simply hop from one tunnel to the next back and forth however often and however much you want, being able to draw around there. You're going to be utilizing all these basic movements combined with the tickets you start the game with, as well as tickets you can unlock in order to manage your movement. You can unlock tickets over here by getting these bonuses. So for example, as you fill in goals, you would unlock the symbol in between 2 goals once you get those, in addition to the points. And then lastly, whenever you don't want to take a symbol or a symbol's not good for you, you can instead cash that in for a basic movement or a harbor movement to move around the board. That's going to give you a lot of flexibility, but at the cost of actually drawing those symbols that will hopefully get you points in the game. Lastly, you want to be mindful of the various abilities you're going to unlock from these. There's a lot of these. I won't go into all of them, but just for example, this ski lift over here effectively allows you to draw from a mountain to 2 away. So for example, I could draw a ski lift. I could draw a little ski lift after I figure out how to draw this over here, but you can effectively draw a little line to 2 away, and you can have the ski lift going over here, and you can go back and forth between these 2 spots because you've created a ski lift from a mountainous region. But you'd have to have unlocked that in order to draw that. These various abilities, and there's a whole stack of them over here, all of them listed on your player aid, are going to give you a lot of ways to break rules in small ways to be able to get a variety of small extra bonuses to help you as you play. That's basically the game. You're going to have these cards over here. You're going to keep drawing cards until eventually you cannot refill the display over here, because after every turn you refill the display. Once you cannot refill the display, that will be the last turn. Everyone gets those symbols, and then you go ahead and score your board based on the goals you completed, how you filled in various spots, as well as all these other scoring objectives that we've gone through. that is the kind of overview as far as how you play Peninsula. Which from there brings us to my review of what I've thought of this game, having played it both not cooperative, there's no co-op mode, both competitive as well as solo. And to that end, Peninsula is very thinky. We're going to go into what I like, don't like, and see others not liking. As usual, timestamps to everything down below. Peninsula is a very thinky game. This is a very hard game to wrap your head around. We're going to get into that, into potential issues with the game. But once you do wrap your head around it, it is incredibly satisfying to try to puzzle out how to get everything done. There's a movement puzzle at play that is very hard to master as you go through this. I've gone through this several times because I keep wanting to get a little better as far as fulfilling these goals, cashing in tickets at the right time, learning when to give up on something and use that movement for something else, and just generally trying to optimize my score. There's a lot going on here because you are trying to keep so much in your head as far as what you're trying to do. At first, it's simply a puzzle of how do you literally just draw things on the board while moving your person around to reconfigure where and how you need to draw. Now, the good thing is the game gives you a lot of freedom as far as how and when you use that movement, so you can use it before or after anytime you would draw something. The downside is you only start the game with 3 tickets to cash in. Outside of that, you have to get your movement by earning extra tickets, by utilizing the features of the things you're drawing on the board, or giving up a draw in order to go ahead and move around the board, which makes movement incredibly a big puzzle. It's a puzzle to solve while you try to set up your board, both for the movement flexibility you can earn from it. Those houses, that back and forth movement, chaining into a tunnel that you can go ahead and jump around the board, you can really set yourself up with a good, strong movement network, but you're trying to do a lot more than that. Because moving is just how you draw, but you also want to get these goals over here. These goals and the sheer variety of goal patterns that you'll have is going to force you to consider different structures as far as what you're trying to do to set up your movement network, what you're trying to do to fulfill goals, which of these abilities are worth pursuing, and which ones are close enough that it's just worth getting for the 2 points alone, and then which symbols are actually helping you versus which symbols are better to just cash in order to move. This is all about balancing so many different things in the game, and it's a challenge that is incredibly satisfying while being incredibly variable, again, because of the giant decks of goals and abilities, as well as the different maps you'll have. Again, there's a few different maps I have over here in this prototype. I don't know the total number there will be, but all of it combines to give you a very complicated yet very satisfying puzzle that is very hard to wrap your head around. I like it a lot competitive. I think not like a lot. I prefer it competitive. I will say the solo mode is also very satisfying. My only problem with right now is it's kind of an semi beat your own score, semi here are goals to achieve, but it's not really about scenario driven scoring, which is usually what I prefer when it comes to these kind of games. But the solo is good for getting your hands on a little bit of the puzzle. Plays out a drop different. You're going to have one more card taken over here, and you're going to be drawing cards to the center puzzle and then lining them up and choosing one side of the river. So kind of trying to mirror that idea that you can't always get what you want, and sometimes you're getting what the game deals you instead. Although, once again, you can trade in your little life boys over there in order to go ahead and choose something else, breaking that rule. But overall, it's just an incredibly puzzly, thinky experience to try to maximize around. As far as what I don't like in the game, first of all, I'm not a fan of the general visualness of the game, and that goes from anything from the actual, cards, the map, the box itself. None of this pulls me in. This is a game that I only tried because it's from the people who did Clans of Caledonia, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Had this been from anyone else, I would not have given it a second look. Roll-and rights, flip-and rights, they are a dime a dozen, and this one did not pull me in visually. I'm harping on that for 2 reasons. First of all, because that's my opinion of how the game looks, but then also, in case you fall into that same camp, it's worth knowing that I only gave it a try because of the people behind the game, and if you were not pulled in by it visually, it might be worth giving it a try for exactly the same reason. Secondly, I will say that I find a lot of these abilities aren't often worth seeking out, and that might just be me and not knowing how to maximize things, but I'd say a lot of times there are abilities, like for example, that ski lift over here. Oh my gosh, the ski lift is fantastic. I love it. Being able to go back and forth between a spot 2 away, that's nothing else lets you do that. That is a specific spot on the board that I think seeking out opens up movement opportunities that are amazing. But then you contrast that with something like this, where you simply get to double the number of cliffs you build on a specific spot when you build cliffs, and that's like, what, an extra point? It doesn't really seem to match the scale of what you get from one ability versus the next. And so I do find that some abilities, hey, it's easy enough to get, you're right there, you draw a house, you can get those 2 points anyway, so why not? Other abilities are worth seeking out, and I find more often than not, they're not worth particularly seeking out, although that is very much situational to your given board state as well as the ability themselves. As far as what I can see others not liking, a few things here. First of all, it is incredibly hard to wrap your head around this game. It's a game that in theory is about movement, but in actuality, movement is so limited and constraining that you have to set up your own network of how you're going to move. I enjoyed and appreciated that puzzle, but you might not, and so you have to know whether this is going to be a game that is something you'll bounce off. I guess there's no way to really know, but it's a very weird game. I will say most of the people I've played this game with have seemed to enjoy it, but I will say that everyone I've played this game with has definitely found it very hard to, you get taught the game, and then immediately you find yourself so constrained, and then you immediately realize the puzzle of what you're trying to do. It's definitely a little weird as far as getting that all to work. Similarly, the scoring parameters over here, again, that can be very, very hard. I find that once you teach people the game, you start reminding them of the scoring, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is too much to consider. There's abilities, there's a general movement puzzle, there's all of this. It does take several games before it all starts to merge into a singular puzzle in your mind that you're trying to work your way through. Your first game or two is literally just about, okay, I understand how to play. I'm not going to try to get better playing. I'm just going to play. And then lastly, it is tight on movement. Getting your head wrapped around it is one part of it, but if you don't like that tightness, this might just not be a game for you. This is very constricting as far as the game goes, and you will very quickly find yourself having to give up drawing in order to just move around the board, and you might be like, I want to do a bit more, and the game's not letting me. And so part of it's about you getting better at creating your network, but part of it is just learning when a move is better than the points you're getting from drawing something on the board. As far as final thoughts on Peninsula, I really enjoyed this. This was one that, again, I was excited-ish to play it, but again, that's because of the people behind it. But other than that, it wasn't on my radar. But it's a very satisfying experience that only starts to, as soon as you start playing it, is when you start to realize how much of a puzzle it is, and then a few plays in is when you start to appreciate the levels of what you're trying to manage and how you're trying to do it, and it is a lot to manage. But I like that lot to manage. I like how much the game is giving you, and I even like the movement constrictions over here because it forces you to examine what you're going to try to do and how you're trying to work towards the overall scoring, the goal scoring, the abilities you want, as well as the limitations of what you actually get in the game. There's a lot to work through, and I find it very satisfying. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, if you want another exploratory themed game, but very much less tight, although tight in different ways, I guess, definitely check out Cartographers from Thunderworks Games. And if you're looking for a game that's focused on that movement puzzle, that less brain-burner than this, but I think a good step into this game, check out the Next Station series. Next Station London, Next Station Tokyo, and Next Station Paris. I think those are all a good level of the thinkiness you have to work with, but definitely a step lower down. In any case, then until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.